All right, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I'm running a minute late today. I was just scrambling with a few things before class, one of which was figuring out if we will be able to go outside today to find snakes. And unfortunately, I'm pretty doubtful. It's just kind of overcast and rainy, and the snakes there won't be out. If it was salamanders, it'd be perfect, but they just won't come out. So I don't think we're going to do that. And I'm still hedging a little bit because if miraculously an hour from now, if the sun peaks out and there's some sun coming down, it might be worth going to check out. But as of right now, we're going to stick to the classroom. Unfortunately, the forecast for Monday has a high of 42 when I just looked. So that's pretty doubtful as well. But again, just be ready to head out Monday. If the weather looks at all decent, we might try and do that. But don't worry, I've got a bunch of other fun stuff planned for us today. We are going to look at play in reptiles today, among other things. So we got lots on our agenda. And that agenda looks like this. I've got some announcements for you. I've got a herpetology, and I'm going to sell this. This is like me trying to pitch classes being awesome. I got announcements. I got herpetology in the news. I got giant prehistoric reptiles. I'm going to give you back to your quiz, which I forgot in my office. I've got a few more native Ohio frogs to present to you. I've got frog calls. And we're talking about play behavior. And then I've got some reminders for you. So lots of fun stuff today. We'll break it up. A lot of it is a little bit seating oriented today, but we'll make the best of that, meaning they don't have activities planned to get up and move around, but we'll make sure you get out of your seats at some point over the next hour and 50 minutes. I'm just kicking myself for leaving my exams or your quizzes in my, oh no, wait, did I leave them here? Wait for it. Yes. Ask Eric is so smart. So I put these in here yesterday and I said, I'm going to need these for class. I'm going to leave them right here so that I have them when it's class time. And look at that. And then I forgot. And then I remembered. Don't you love when you do that? And you're like, man, I am so smart. All right, cool. All right. Starting off, actually, before I do any of this, questions. Okay. A couple announcements. First, I'm going to announce he's not here, but Princeton is giving his presentation of his honors work next week, Thursday at 4:10. He's going to present two studies that he conducted as part of the lab on the wall lizards of Cincinnati. There's going to be snacks. Come check it out. Princeton's done some really great work. He's a great presenter. It's kind of his last research presentation before he graduates, and I'm sure he'd love to see a lot of us there in support. So please do come check that out if you're able. Yes. This is a symposium, correct? You could call it that. Yeah. I mean, it's at the same time and location as what used to be the science seminar series or whatever it was called, but it doesn't really exist anymore because of COVID. Oh yeah, it's not. We actually this has been a big conflict. To be honest, we had this scheduled months before we knew that the symposium was even going to happen, and now the symposium is happening at the same time. But we're going to go ahead and keep his presentation at the same time. So I apologize for any conflicts, but it was not anything that we knew about in advance. So come check out Princeton. Other announcement, random one, but if anyone's interested in living with this adorable cat named Potato for the summer, let me know. We need a house sitter. I'm working on a few leads, but if anyone knows anyone that's interested, please pass on that information and have them contact me. All right, herpetology in the news. So this was a big article that came out a week or two ago, very recently. And the gist of this story is that these researchers believe that they found fossilized dinosaurs and fish, and so just dinosaurs and fish, at least dinosaurs and fish from the spring day, 65-ish million years ago, when a giant meteor struck the Earth and created what we now know as the Cretaceous, the end Cretaceous extinction event. And they believe they found dinosaurs from that exact day. And the reason that they believe this, or let me back up. This is from a well-reserved site in North Dakota in the United States, and they found a leg that's very well preserved. And they basically put together the story that these were a kind of ornithischian dinosaur you see along the shore here, and basically that there was a giant tsunami-like wave that washed up and basically ripped the leg off the animal, and then it subsequently became fossilized. Now, there's other stronger evidence for why they think this is the day of the the meteor hit, and that is that they find these tiny glass sphericals filled with gases of a certain concentration, bless you, that could only be, that they think were created from this impact event. Because basically what happened is that the meteor struck the Earth, it launched a whole bunch of stuff into the atmosphere, and then basically all of that stuff in the atmosphere rained down, and as it gained momentum, it basically superheated the atmosphere and just caused some crazy stuff to happen. So there's a lot of reasons why this meteor was destructive. Some of it was very immediate, like this super hot ash and molecules raining down on the planet, but then also subsequently the fact that the atmosphere was super dense with all this sediment for years and years and years, which prevented sunlight getting through and basically created a winter lasting many, many years, if not decades, if not centuries. So all these combination of things led to the extinction, but they think they have fossils actually from that day. And it's pretty cool. Here's a quote from one of the researchers. He's actually a pretty famous, well-known paleontologist named Paul Barrett. And the quote is, "This looks like an animal whose leg has simply been ripped off really quickly. There's no evidence on the leg of disease. There are no obvious pathologies. There's no trace of the leg being scavenged. Okay, Zoom is going to be dumb. It's going to make me mad. So yeah, check it out. I put a link to this article in the class program for Monday next. There's no link to the original publication because there isn't one. It's just a link to the BBC site about this story. So cool stuff. Now I want to just perfect transition to talk about this, what actually happened at the end Cretaceous event. Let me do one thing here to orient my slides and see what questions you have before we start in on this. Jid, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't being super close attention. This is kind of right now in my notes, but why do they think that the leg was before the meteor strike?
Why do they think that it was before the meteor strike?
Yeah.
Well, they basically, the way that the bone was removed from the animal and preserved suggests that it was kind of torn off and immediately became entombed in sediment to become fossilized.
Oh.
Yeah, and the real evidence that it was on the day of the meteor strike comes from these glass sphericals they found in the gills of the fossilized fish. There's more detail there that we don't need to get into, but that's the gist of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Michaela, go ahead.
That's what I was going to get into.
Yeah.
Like, was it just found in a layer of rock dust from that time, or like how is that evidence?
Because they know that those things are fossilized at the same time. And so they can infer then, okay, if these glass sphericals are present in the fish fossils, then that means this dino leg had to be fossilized at the same time. And, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm putting down paleontology, but sometimes you have this fossilized leg and you kind of got to build a story around it. And it's the idea of like, here's a plausible story. We can't say for sure this is what happened, but this is a reasonable inference based on these lines of evidence. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is the first fossil found from the Age of Reptiles?
Well, that is a little bit controversial, depending on who you ask. There are, or maybe it's the same site. there's another group of researchers that claim that they have found this fossils, but now I'm realizing that I might be conflating two different stories about the same group of researchers. So I'm not 100% sure. I know that I've read about this twice, but I don't know if it's the same study or two different studies. So yeah, but they think they're really narrowing. They know it was like a spring day when the meteor hit because of the way that the pollen that was fossilized, and they know like specific kinds of pollen only come out at certain times of year and et cetera. Plus, this is a sneezy class today. All right, what's going on over there? What's that? Like a marriage proposal? This is just in class. This is great. Okay, I mean, a lot of exciting things have happened in class over the year. I mean, you look back on the semester, you'd be like, what did you learn in herpetology? Well, we found a gun and someone's getting married. Like, awesome, guys. I'm glad. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's exciting. Well, congratulations, everybody. I'm really happy. And I personally, I love weddings, so I expect an invitation. Okay, good, thank you. That's what I was looking for. This is great. This is great herpetology class. Okay, go back. I'm going to wrap up the lecture on the age of reptiles. So I'm going to bring us back to this phylogeny that you're familiar with after Monday's class, showing the relationships between extant, currently living, and extinct, no longer living groups of reptiles. And it's a big old phylogeny. It's rather complicated. There's a few bits in here that I want to make sure you know. Of course, you should know the relationships among all the extant groups because we've gone over that extensively. But specifically, we're going to zoom in on the archosaurs. And I want you to remember that the pterosaurs are the sister taxa to all the other archosaurs. And then the pseudosuchia, so the crocodilians, are then the sister taxa to the remaining group of archosaurs, which we will refer to as the dinosaurs. So remember, archosaurs are dinosaurs plus crocodilians plus pterosaurs, right? Within dinosaurs, we have a couple of different groups. You have two major groups, the saurischians and the ornithischians. And then within the saurischians, we have the sauropods and the theropods. And remember that birds are a highly, the only extant group of dinosaurs, and they are of the theropod lineage. All of that's great. This is a very traditional view of these evolutionary relationships. It was thought to be this way for many, many decades and is kind of held as like the foundation of our understanding of evolutionary relationships among these groups. Until 2017, when this group of researchers, including the co-author here, Paul Barrett, who I just gave you a quotation from the other study before, put out a new paper that rocked the dino world. And it was a big deal because it basically reimagined the evolutionary relationships among dinosaurs. And what they did, I'm not going to get into the details of the study, but they basically took, I mentioned earlier that sometimes we're inferring dinosaurs and their relatedness to each other based on just bones or fragments of bones or very little evidence. What these guys did is they took all of the available morphological data on all the groups, and they used like one giant statistical analysis to infer what was the most parsimonious way that these groups could be related. So in other words, what is the simplest way that accurately describes those relationships? It's getting sunny out, guys. Oh, shit, yeah, we might pop out. Someone want to pull up the hour by hour forecast real quick?
It said no rain for the next
Few
few hours.
hours?
That's what mine said. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe
Mine says the same thing.
Yeah.
it said no more rain.
Okay.
Until like 11 p.m.
Okay.
It says cloudy conditions, but
It's not cloudy now. Okay. Let me need to grab a couple things. Yeah, check the radar real quick. But we can finish this up and then head out. The sun stays out for a second. Okay, good news. Okay, so anyway, the classic interpretation I described to you is shown on the left here, where we have the ornithischia and the sauroschia, and the sauroschia divided into sauropods and theropods, right? That's what I taught you. This new paper described a totally different group relationship, whereby we had the sauropods being the sister taxa to this new group they called Ornithoscelida. I think I'm pronouncing that right, which is divided into the theropods and the ornithischia. There's a few other things that changed, but the gist of it is that they changed, instead of theropods and sauropods being sister taxa, now we have ornithischia, which is Triceratops and Kylosaurs, all those guys, and the theropods being grouped together, and then the sauropods being the outgroup to that. And we see some examples of this here of the example species. So a theropod being this Herrerasaur and another big sauropod here, they would be grouped together. And then we have the ornithischians and other theropods here. So actually, I said that wrong. The Herrerasaur was formerly thought to be a theropod, but this new hypothesis put it as sister to the other sauropods. Don't worry about that detail. But the important takeaway here is that the ornithischia and the theropods are sister, and then the sauropods are there. So kind of cool study that really blew up these relationships, and it has some really important ramifications for how we think about how dinosaurs lived and evolved. And some of those big takeaway messengers is that the pelvic bone structure that I described earlier is maybe not the most reliable indicator of evolutionary relationships on its own. Rather than just use this one thing, using all of this other available information is actually better. This suggests that hypercarnivory evolved twice. Hypercarnivory being what we generally associate with like a T-Rex, right? But now we see that instead of evolving once in the theropod lineage, it evolved once in the theropods and once in this other lineage of Herrerasaurs. And also that feathers maybe just evolved just once. So the strongest evidence from feathers comes from ornithischia and theropods. And if we look at back, if we assume the traditional relationship, then that suggests that if sauropods don't have feathers, but these guys do and these guys do, that most likely feathers evolved twice, once in each of those lineages. But with the new hypothesis, we can see that feathers maybe just evolved once in this ornithosphelida lineage, and then both ornithischia and theropods have those feathers. And let me take a question, McKenna, go ahead.
So referring to the original hypothesis where they kind of made their hypothesis based off of the shape of the pelvic bone, why did they make that? It's like, why was that the trait that they pinpointed that they were like, that's it, that's it?
Yeah, that's a good question. The reason is because it seemed like a very clear different trait that separated pretty neatly between those two lineages, at least at the time and based on the data that they have. There's probably more to it exactly why that pelvis structure was thought to be so important that I'm not sure if I know, but that's the gist of it. Go ahead, Sam.
So then with this model, since sauropods and theropods have such similar pelvic structures from like the previous basin or similar pelvic structures, will we know like why they have the similar pelvic structures, or like
why these two guys kind of convergently evolved pelvic structures? We don't know exactly, but it's certainly possible that that pelvic structure evolved twice, or was maybe ancestral, and then the other pelvic structure evolved, or well, these guys and these guys and these guys all have the same pelvic structure. So maybe the ancestor had that pelvic structure, and then these guys have a derived pelvic structure.
So it's more likely that there was just like a shift of the pelvic structure with ornithischia or like convergent evolution there than it is for convergent evolution for feathers, ornithischia and theropod.
That's the idea. That's kind of some of the debate though, right? But based on this lineage, all of these guys have the saurischian hip structure. And so you could say that maybe that was the ancestral state, and that the ornithischian hip structure evolved just once in this lineage. So that seems pretty parsimonious. Also seems parsimonious that feathers evolved once somewhere here, and then those groups got it. So based on both of those things and a whole bunch of other stuff they looked at, those of you guys in vertebrate anatomy remember this, we had a whole class on this study, right? Looking over here, my vertebrate and Alan's back there too. There's a whole bunch of other evidence too, but that's the idea exactly. So what relationship can most simply describe all of these character shifts in those traits among different groups? You have to put all of that together, and based on that, this is what they inferred from this study a couple years ago. All right, let me get McKenna, Nebraska.
The other bit about feathers also, do we know if there are any like significant morphological differences between ornithischia and feathers and their
That's a fantastic question. I don't know the answer. Yeah, and if I feel like that if there were differences in the feather structure, I would have remembered reading about it. So I can't say with certainty there isn't, but at least off the top of my head, I don't think there is. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Let's see, Nebraska.
That was my question too, but also, so are they saying that like this is like really truly what we believe, or are they saying like there's a 50-50 shot?
Well, so we have to remember that any phylogeny is a hypothesis. And so they're saying that based on our analysis of all of these different bone structures across all of these different dinosaurs, this seems to be the most likely explanation. So nothing is ever proven, but we can say with a certain amount of certainty that this is the most likely scenario. And there's often a number associated with that. For this study, I don't know what that, the probability of this being correct is based on their data, but it's the most likely. Yep, that's a great question. Yep, so it's never, and there's some folks that still don't believe this. I'm pretty sold on this, actually. I think it's a pretty thorough study, but I'm not a paleontologist, so who cares what I think? But it's controversial in the dino world. Let's see, I had Sid, yep.
I have two questions.
Mhm.
So the first question I had was, in terms of the pelvic hypothesis, I guess like to me, and if you'd like to say we're not paleontologists, but like that seems pretty, I don't want to say stupid, but like it doesn't seem super, I guess, accurate of like their distinguishing feature, just that pelvic feature. So I guess like my question is, why wasn't this done earlier?
Well, we didn't have the data. And so what you're saying is true, as if you were assuming that we had all of this information about all these dinos, and then we just decided to ignore a lot of it and look at one thing, that wouldn't be smart. The truth is we just didn't have the data. And when that hypothesis was first formed, we didn't even know half the dinos that we know of now we didn't even know they didn't even have names, right? And so basically what these guys are doing is saying, wait, we have a whole bunch more data now. We should use all this data to retest this hypothesis. And that's exactly what they did.
And my other question was, I know you used this example, but what is hypertrophy? Because you said that the Tyrannosaurus is an example.
Just super adept predators that are carnivore specialists. Okay. Yep. So, basically when you think of theropods, you think of T-Rex, Allosaurus, Velociraptors, Deinonychus, all these guys that you don't want to get chased by. That's a good way to put it. Abby's your hand up? I thought it was, okay. Sam, go ahead.
What is the sort of like status of like this being accepted by like scholarship?
Good. So this paper is 5 years old at this point. I don't know, actually. I don't know what the most recent kind of consensus is. The paleontological world can be pretty campy. Not campy in the sense of like, I don't know, John Waters campy, but campy in the sense of like forming factions, factionated. Yeah, that's what balkanized. There's the word. Yeah, kind of. And so people tend to stick to their hypotheses. Again, I'm making a generalization about a branch of science that I'm not part of, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, from what I see, it is. Yeah. So but exactly how widely this is accepted now, I'm not sure. That's a good question. Yeah. Cool. Great questions, guys. Actually, there's two other points here I want to make. This isn't really that relevant to us, but this new relationship suggests that the dinos actually originated in the giant former supercontinent called Laurasia. And also, kind of going back to this whole discussion, if we reframe those evolutionary relationships, it asks us to rethink about how other anatomical features might be similar or different among those groups, and to think about whether they're the result of convergent evolution or synapomorphy. So synapomorphy is not a word that we've had this semester. Have we talked about synapomorphies?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, we need to know this word. What a great word. It's fun. You should say it out loud. Not necessarily right now, but you can. But I would recommend doing it like next time you're out with your friends somewhere and just be like, yo, synapomorphy. And they'll be like, what? And you'll be like, never mind. It's from herpetology, you won't get it. Don't do that, because then you sound like a snob. You give herpetologists a bad name. I'm just kidding. Okay, so convergent evolution is when two different lineages evolve the same trait distinctly. So let's just say, for example, a great example actually here would be hypercarnivory. Hypercarnivory evolved in this lineage of theropods, this lineage of Herrerasaurs independently. So here we have the same trait evolving twice independently. That is convergent evolution. Another great example that we'll see is the body shape of dolphins and ichthyosaurs. They look really similar, not at all closely related. Again, convergent evolution leading to the same solution to the same problem, basically. Synapomorphy is the opposite. Synapomorphy is when two lineages share the same characteristic because they share the same ancestor. And so let's take feathers, for example. We'll take the Ornithoschia and the theropods, and we'll say that their ancestor over here had feathers, and both these guys now have feathers. So the reason they have feathers is because their common ancestor also had feathers. So they have shared traits because of evolutionary history. So you can think of convergent evolution as shared traits due to novel evolutionary adaptations, whereas synapomorphy is shared traits due to shared common ancestry.
Based on what you just defined, that does that mean it's the same thing as homologous evolution?
Well, a homologous trait would be no, similar but not the same. So homology would be two structures that are derived from the same ancestral structure. So let's take, for example, the bones that are in your hand, your carpals right here, and in a dog, the dog actually walks like this, right? And those bones are that like first limb segment. Those are a dog's carpals. Those are homologous. They have the same origin because our ancestors had those bones, but they serve different functions in a dog and a human, something like that. Mm-hmm. Or like finger bones on a human and the bones of, here we go, the wing of a bat, right? So here's a bat. Let's just do this while I have it out. And these are its wings, and its wings are formed by this membrane that's supported by these bones. And these are essentially the bat's finger bones. Those are homologous to the bones in our digits. They serve a very different function, but they come from the same kind of evolutionary origin. The common ancestors of human and bats both had these kind of sets of carpals and metacarpals, or no, I'm sorry. I said these are your metacarpals, not your carpals. What am I talking about? Your carpals are the bones of your wrist, metacarpals are the bones in the hand. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. Good.
So like a more short-term example of synapomorphy, would it be like if like somebody had 6 fingers and that was a genetic trait and both their kids had 6 fingers, you could say that that's their synapomorphy to their parents?
As a metaphor, you could use that, but we don't talk about evolution in terms of individuals. We would talk about in terms of species.
Yeah.
So if you think of that parent and their offspring as groups of species, you could say something like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of a different thing if we're just talking about a few individuals within the population.
Do you have like an example about like in general and real
Of
like synapomorphy, like what you just said,
Mhm.
like a current, not dinosaur?
a synapomorphy? So you could use any trait that is shared by all the members of a clade. So for example, milk production in mammals, right? That's a synapomorphy because it's shared by all of the species within that clade due to their common ancestry. It didn't re-evolve in all of the different lineages of, cows and bats and manatees and rhinoceros and humans didn't all independently evolve the capacity to feed their offspring with milk. It's a shared trait amongst them. Yeah. Speaking of which, I once saw a rhinoceros baby feeding, and it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It was ridiculously cute. Yep.
It's a shared trait for the exact same function.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Due to common ancestry. That's the important piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't believe that for T-Rex. It's pretty, we've got a lot of T-Rex bones, but it's certainly happened. And one of the most famous examples is the Apatosaurus brontosaurus fiasco, where they had the skeleton of a brontosaurus, but they put an Apatosaurus head on it and they called it a brontosaurus. But then they realized that it wasn't really that, it was something else with an Apatosaurus head. So then brontosaurus didn't exist anymore. But then they went back and they looked at those bones and they said, hey, that actually is a brontosaurus. We had the wrong skull, but actually is this a species. So the brontosaurus is back. Maybe Pluto will be back soon too. But that stuff does happen a lot. Okay, I'm back online again. Let me just take a peek outside here, guys. We're losing our sunshine. Actually, I don't know if it's even going to be good. It's really not that great. Yeah, I don't know if I want to take the whole class down there and we only spend an hour down there and not find anything though, isn't it? Yeah. Well, let me keep cranking with this for the moment and then we can take a look again. All right, so let's go back to this big phylogeny and I want to talk about a few more groups here. Let's talk about Plesiosaurs. So these were a group of aquatic, totally 100% aquatic reptiles, and they were ferocious predators that live in the ocean. They include Elasmosaurus, Kronosaurus, Leopleurodon. These guys had big jaws. They ate a lot of different aquatic prey. Elasmosaurus is kind of famous for having this really long neck. Very cool stuff there. And Elasmosaurus was not a dinosaur, but a plesiosaur. So that's all I'm going to say about these guys. Just giving you a very big overview of the group. Yeah, go ahead.
Do we even know each species?
No. Lisa.
Do you think the Loch monster?
Totally looks like a Elasmosaur, right?
Just say.
Yep. Yep, that checks out.
Did you see the mermaid video that just came out?
The mermaid video.
Yeah, there's a new mermaid video and it legitimately looks like a mermaid.
You said a new mermaid video, suggesting that there's old mermaid videos? Okay. Anyway, so here's a good example. I want to show you an example of convergent evolution. So we have these two groups, the plesiosaurs and the mosasaurs. Notice they're not terribly closely related. They're kind of in the same area, but they're not sister taxa or anything. Yet mosasaurs also were large predatory aquatic reptiles. Now, what's important to note, and you don't see this in the phylogeny, is that they did not live at the same time. Plesiosaurs were earlier, mosasaurs were later. But a great example of convergent evolution in terms of body shape. This Dinosaurs looks a lot like a Leopleurodon. We also have Mosasaurus here. Tylosaurus was another one. So a good example of that convergent evolution. And what was also noteworthy too is notice that mosasaurs are actually sister to the squamates. So they're actually more closely related to squamates than Tuatara is even. And so these guys were, I believe some of the most recent thinking is that they're close relatives of like varanid monitor lizards even. And they were huge ocean dwelling predators that you see here. Let me get you, Chloe. I don't know that off the top of my head. No, that's a good question, where they were found exactly. Yeah. Other question. Is this the mermaid video?
It's like it legitimately looks like a mermaid and there's like it has like little fish bottom with a place. Oh, Abby, now your phone's not working. Yeah. But it like legitimately.
All right, let's come back to this one for a moment. I remain skeptical. So go ahead.
These guys are pretty big, yes.
They were not quite as big as the plesiosaurs, but they're sizable. I don't remember the dimensions off the top of my head, but you wouldn't want to meet one in a small pond. No, not that big. These guys, I think Dinosaurs are pretty small. They're probably a couple meters long, 2-3 meters long, maybe not quite even 3. Mosasaurs were bigger. Tylosaur was bigger too, but. Okay, and now I want to talk about another group. And notice I've got the question mark in the phylogeny here. We're not sure exactly how these guys are related, but this is the Placodonts. These guys were wackamodoodle. We have three examples I want to show you are Hinotus, Placodus, and Placochelys. What's remarkable to me, again, convergent evolution, these are not turtles. They look remarkably like turtles. They have this big carapace. It's got this bony shell on it. It's got the legs and the head that stick out and the tail. This guy, Placodus, is in the same group, but he doesn't have that big bony shell. Placochelys does. So again, convergent evolution, these guys were marine dwellers and they're pretty sizable. Like I've actually seen this, actually, no, I took this picture. This is my picture from a museum in Germany. And these guys, Hinotus, like their shell is like this big. So it's pretty, in on par with like the world's biggest tortoises today. Mm-hmm.
Does the term placo mean like armor or something like that? Because I know that there's a group of fish from the Devonian called the Placket.
Yes,
That
they're
armor face.
yeah, those guys are like Dunkleosteus and those
Yeah.
guys. They were.
Is that what that word means?
It does. Yep. Yep.
It's just
It means plate. Is plate or armor or something like that, right? Yeah. Yep. And so they're placodonts because they had these bony plates. Yeah. Good connection. Yeah. Dunkleosteus. Those guys were the big, like one of the. When were they? Late Permian, I think. I don't remember, but yeah.
They were Devonian.
They were Devonian even. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Devonian into the Permian.
They're big top predators of their day. Hypercarnivory. There you go.
There have been some Dunkleosteus fossils found in Ohio.
Really? Oh,
That's what our rock is. That it?
no kidding.
Yeah, it's like all.
Good for Ohio.
Lake Camp.
Yeah, I was not sold on Ohio, but maybe that'll do it. That's a different story. All right, the last group I want to talk about is ichthyosaurs. Again, convergent evolution of body shape I mentioned. These were entirely aquatic, and you can tell by their body shape here. I have just a whole bunch of examples. Really cool. And what's cool actually is we have fossils of these guys in the process of giving birth. It's really cool. I've actually seen these fossils. I think I took this picture too at this really great museum in Germany where they close to where they found some of these. But these amazingly preserved specimens where you can actually see like the little baby ichthyosaur in the mama. It's pretty wild. And then a big meteor hit and killed everything. We're pretty darn sure that that is what happened. It's called the Kpg impact. So it's the Cretaceous Paleogene impact because those the two time periods that it divides. The K stands for Cretaceous, which doesn't make sense. Cretaceous starts with a C. It has to do with like the German word for chalk, on which the word Cretaceous is, it's something like that. So, but K is Cretaceous, even though that's kind of wonky. So yeah, big meteor came, wiped out a lot. Notice that this isn't the worst extinction event ever to happen on our planet, despite some crazy percentage of organisms being wiped out. The extinction event between the Permian and the Triassic actually was even more dramatic than this one. So this was about 65, 66 million years ago. And then only a few groups remained. So one distinct lineage of theropods survived this. That now it was the ancestor to what we now call birds. What's notable here is that dinosaurs dominated the landscape for so long, but what's important to think about is at that time, there were mammals, but they were small. They were primarily either fossorial or arboreal. They weren't really big, they weren't dominating. And what happened after this event is it wiped out all these big dino groups and it allowed mammals to really kind of take off in an ecological and evolutionary sense. And so we have this meteor to thank for us having evolved from our little elephant shrew ancestors. Let me get Sid, Lisa, Sam, Abby.
What is PG stands for?
Paleogene. Mhm.
It's really gone, and then it kind of restarts from there.
Mhm.
I wonder what happened. Like, I know you said the mammals kind of like, they're like, oh man, it's my time to shine, that kind of stuff. But, like also at the same time, I'm wondering how they survive that impact as well.
How they survive the impact.
Yeah.
So one of the lines of thinking is that dinos, because of their large size, they require a lot of food. And so when you have this winter for years and years, there's no sun, there's no photosynthesis, there's not a lot of plants. Also, a lot of them were fossorial, so they could live underground, so surviving the impact itself and just could kind of hang on. So a lot of different reasons how they're able to hang on in that changed world. And then when the world kind of gradually was changing again, they're able to kind of expand from there and fill all those open ecological niches. That's a good question. Sam.
So this might be going into a little bit of a different direction, but it's not directly about herpetology. But on the map, it's like this darker green, like sort of translucently part that's going all around like North America and northern part of South America.
This guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like where there were more direct effects of the impact?
Yeah, I don't have the legend for the figure, but basically there was like a certain kind of impact. I think everything within this radius was just like gone. And then everything within this suffered whatever level of.
So then, I guess my follow-up question is, because that's very localized on the Western Hemisphere.
Mhm.
Do we know what like kind of impact this had on the Eastern Hemisphere?
Well, what it did is this dust covered the earth for years and years and years. And so that change in the reduction in sunlight getting through and the subsequent change in plant communities and all that that was global, even if the immediate effects of the impact weren't. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it is analogous to, because you just put a bunch of crap in the atmosphere and sunlight can't get through, and then it gets really cold and stuff dies. Oh wait, I had Abby and then Chase. Yep.
I had the same question.
Mhm.
In mammals, we're sure there wasn't sunlight or.
They like I was saying with Sid before, is they were often, a lot of them were underground, and so they relied on food sources that maybe got nutrients from other places, or there was enough, it's not like everything died, just a lot of it died, and so they didn't require as much food because they were smaller. So I don't know if we know exactly the reason, but that kind of combination of traits allowed them to hang on there.
Two follow-up questions. One, whether there's bugs.
Lots of insects, yeah.
And two. Oh. So like mammals were like the second for the dinosaurs, or were they like lower?
Well, let's not think of them. I mean, we can think of them as filling a different ecological role than they do now, or than dinosaurs did, right?
So if there were to be another meteor that hit,
Yeah, we'd be screwed.
obviously we've got all of the mammals and stuff.
Mhm. Maybe.
Maybe, like insects, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure cockroaches will be around forever.
Oh, yeah.
That's yeah. I mean, we don't. I mean, it would be really hard to predict what would necessarily survive that and what wouldn't. And it depends. It depends on a lot of factors. Let me get. I've got McKenna and then Ethan and wait, and Chloe and Sid. Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Is that map of what the impact range meant to be like, more, I guess, like modernized representation? Because at the time the plates would have been different.
Yeah. They weren't dramatic. The plates were actually more or less in the same place, but the where water and land was very different. But yeah, the what you see here is modern day continental shapes. Yeah, that's a good observation. I lost the order. I think I had Ethan, Chloe, Sid.
I just want to make quick though.
Yeah, yeah.
Chase's thing, like often with these big extinction events, the only things that survive are like the really small things. So when the Permian extinction happened, it was the same thing where only the really small stuff survived. So if, like
Yep.
same event would happen now, it would be things like it wouldn't necessarily be like one group going ahead. It's just like all the small things with that have to fill those larger niches.
Mhm.
that are before.
And it just depends too on their diet and their thermal needs and all of that stuff as well.
So like the thing that led to the dinosaur eventually, when the Permian extinction happens, like a little like mole type thing, a little bit of breath, and then eventually.
The seagull, actually going to show you a picture of the first dinosaur in just a second. Yeah. Sid?
To Chase's point, there is a super cool exhibit within the Natural History Museum of DC where they show like a little sculpture of the first mammal, or the thing that gave rise to the first mammal, I guess, that survived. And it's really cool because you can just get an idea of like how small the animal was.
Yeah, and there are other what's called mammal-like reptiles that are around too, like in the early.
That might have been what it was.
Yeah, they're in the Permian tribe, but they were really big guys too. They're all these crazy, like kind of cow reptile looking things. No, what's the word for that group? Say it again.
Giganoxus.
Yeah, there was another cyanodonts were those guys too. Yeah, go ahead.
This is mostly going off of like one thing that I saw. I've seen some discussion that like there may have been some larger mammals before the Kpg extinction, but just that they weren't the ones that survived.
Yeah.
Compared to the smaller ones.
I don't know off the top of my head, but that seems totally plausible.
I saw
Yeah.
part of a documentary they came out recently that was about that, where they were talking about some like late Cretaceous mammals that got as like as large as like badgers or slightly larger than that. Obviously, still on the smaller end of things.
Right. Yeah, and it's important to know that's a great point, Sam, because it's not that every species of mammal survived. Also, I want to remind you is that snakes, lizards, turtles, crocodilians, tuatara, they all survived this too, right? That's why they're alive today. And those groups were around in the Cretaceous. So lizards and snakes, for example, predate this meteor. So those guys survived the impact. So it's not even that all reptiles were wiped out. It's just that all the dinos, with the exception of birds, were wiped out. A lot of stuff died. It was bad. It was bad news.
I just want to say too, because you said that there were crocodiles and stuff, like even some like of those reptiles went to fill in the niches, like following the extinction event, there were like crocodiles that had like hooves that then moved on the, like evolved a hoop-like structure and moved on the land and took like a dinosaur niche.
You're right, but that was in the Triassic.
Oh, was it?
That was after the, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Basically, the crocodilians were kind of dominant before the dinos were dominant. And I say dominant, by dominant, I mean like they were big and they filled those ecological spaces. Yeah, that's exactly right. Let me get Chloe and then I'll go back to Sam.
Is this also
Mhm. Mhm.
So it had like a similar effect when the animals in the water.
Mhm.
They might not be able to stay level of sunlight.
Well, they do indirectly because their food does, right? And so if you're a ichthyosaur feeding on fish that feed on algae, and all of a sudden there's no sun, there's no algae, there's no fish, there's no ichthyosaurs, right? I mean, I'm kind of simplifying it, but basically, even if an animal doesn't require sunlight directly, there's still these food webs that are dependent on sunlight.
You mentioned that there were tuatara
Mhm.
in this, like
Mhm.
before the messenger.
Mhm.
What were like? Do you know what fossilized microcephals were like?
Yeah,
I've
there
never
were.
heard anything about them.
They were much more diverse. Well, obviously there's only like one species left now, but there was a number of different species and they're found across the globe, right? And they were never like a huge group or dominant or anything like that, but there was a lot of them in a lot of different places. Yeah, it was cool. And I don't, and we only have the one group, the one species living now. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly why I don't know why they're gone, but.
Okay, I'm gonna be really sad if I'm not gonna be correct in phrasing this, but I should know this. Sharks were alive during this time, correct?
Sharks were alive during this time, correct? Yes.
Okay, so like how did they survive and a lot of the other bigger fish and like different other things that were in the ocean? They just,
I don't know.
So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like all of the ancestors of everything I have today, some
Yeah.
survived that, and exactly why the ichthyosaur died and not the shark, I couldn't tell you that. Yeah, that's a good question, but I don't know. Lisa, yeah.
Okay, so I know we're inching towards like the sixth like extinction. In terms of like your knowledge on animal resilience and stuff like that, what organisms do you think would the most likely to survive?
Oh, cockroaches for sure, and wall
Yeah.
lizards. Wall lizards and cockroaches will take over the planet. I don't know. Maybe that's just my hope, but yeah. It would be so hard to know because the changes that we're instigating now are really rapid compared to almost all other environmental changes in history, with the exception of this. Things are happening much quicker. It doesn't really feel that way to us because during our lifetime, it's not like there's boom, a meteor strikes, but essentially it is a snap of the fingers in geologic time that we're, over the course of 200 years, really rapidly changing the composition of the atmosphere. Like that's never happened before, with the exception of like a meteor hitting. So yeah, let's cross our fingers and be nice to wall lizards. That's the story, because they're gonna one day, they're gonna be in charge, and so we want to be extra nice. All right, so let's take one more question, and then I want to wrap this up.
This is not really fun, but it's
Mhm.
on what you
Mhm.
said. There's an incredibly well-written book called Six Mass Extinction. I think it won the Pulitzer Prize. But it's this really cool mix of like journalistic writing, but also just has enough like scientific writing
Mhm.
that is pretty engaging with people that do have a background. And it kind of goes through different examples of species and like basically gives you a pretty good idea of the scope of the problem.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed it. It was a good book.
Six Extinction. I've heard of the title. Yeah.
It came out, I think, a while ago. I said like 2016.
Okay.
I have to look back up.
All right, let's go. So the takeaway story here is this is Coelophysis. This is often considered the first dinosaur. It's the size of like a little dog. Super cute, early Triassic, earliest Triassic. And so the ancestor of these guys evolved into Tyrannosaurus Rex. Excuse me, not the ancestors. The descendants of Coelophysis were Tyrannosaurus Rex, also Apatosaurus, and also the chickadee. Right. And so the takeaway message here is that evolution is really cool in my mind, in that you can take all of these different paths, and also it's undirected, meaning that it's not moving towards all organisms always being bigger or always being smarter or always having whatever trait. Is that it varies just depending on the ecological circumstances and a whole bunch of other factors too, of course. we as humans often make the mistake of thinking that evolution is working towards the end goal of creating smart creatures, but smarts isn't necessarily, it's one solution to surviving on the planet, but honestly, it's not a very common solution, and its efficacy remains to be, in the long run, at least, it remains to be tested. So let's wrap this up. I want to just put this slide back up. This is the takeaway messages that I started with. The first is that there's a truly fantastic diversity of reptiles on the planet for a very, very long time. I showed you a lot of those. That these guys filled a variety of ecological niches and possessed a number of adaptations that we don't see or don't see commonly in extant reptiles today. And that knowing these evolutionary relationships can also help us understand the animals that are alive today. So for example, birds have feathers because they're theropod dinosaurs, and we saw that feathers evolved in lineage, depending what you want to go with, but let's say the lineage that led to ornithischian and theropod dinosaurs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I'm going to say about the Age of Reptiles. I want to make sure we got this lecture in this semester. And I'm looking outside, and it's pretty marginal, but it sure would be nice to get outside, especially if Monday is going to be in the 40s. And so what I'm going to do right now is make the call that we are going to go out. I need about 5 minutes to get my field gear together. And what I want to do is this. I want to give your quizzes back actually first, and then we will take a quick break, and then let's meet. What happens if you go down these stairs? Do we go out? Let's meet by the front door of the Science Center in about 5 minutes. You can leave your stuff in the classroom if you want, but let's go walk around. I might not collect all the data on snakes. We don't have too much time, but it would be worth kind of checking it out at least. If I could get like a couple people that give me a hand with some field gear. Abby, you volunteering to help? Okay, yeah, actually, if you could do that, that would be great. And then if I get a couple people to help with field gear, that would be awesome. We're gonna just go down along Delaware Run where we found the gun. Yeah. Depends if you want. We don't need to, I'll say. So actually, what I'm gonna do right now then is give my final announcements right now, so we don't need to come back later too. So let me do that. Alan, go ahead. Oh yeah, come with me after we do this. That would be great. SKs too? Great, that'd be super. So real quick, here are your quiz grades, and I will have, Cameron, would you mind, yours is on top. I'm gonna do this. And actually, that's actually probably a breach of confidentiality to have someone else pass these out. So you guys did fantastically. I'm just going to talk as I pass these out. It was out of a 20, and the class average was like 95%, just under 19. I will be honest, I am thoroughly impressed with the way the class performed on this exam, especially the frog calls. You guys rocked it. So if you're seeing that your score is on the low end of this distribution, think about how you're preparing for your upcoming quizzes and or exams. Notice that I'm giving you this back in 2 parts. The frog calls were 8 points. The longer question was 12.
Oh, sorry. I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Look at that. You pass that number, Sam. Sam.
Everything in there was good. All at the same time.
Sick. Sam.
All right, no good. Okay, so now I'm trying the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's where places.
And you should have Jordan still there.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead here, just do announcements now so we don't have to come back. We're gonna talk about play and reptiles on Monday. So just a few reminders. Your primary literature assignment is due on the 25th. Some of you, I actually spent some time this morning going through the submissions for which article you selected, and I got back to some of you this morning. I will go back and get the confirm with the rest of your articles as soon as I can, because I know you need to wait on that before you can do the assignment. I did about half the class this morning that had submitted early, and that was due before class today. So if you haven't done that yet, do that ASAP. Oh, here's something fun too. We have to change the date of our mud puppy outing. So this is great. So there's actually, so it's a little complicated, but I'll give you the quick story. The Division of Natural Resources is holding a meeting next week, Wednesday in the evening. And there's a group of protesters that are planning on disrupting the application of TFN, which is the lampricide. You guys read the paper about lampricide effect on mud puppies, et cetera. They're having a meeting about this on Wednesday night next week. That's going to be interesting and controversial. And so Ryan, the researcher from OSU, wants to be at that meeting. So he can't accommodate us Wednesday night. So instead, we're going to do this. We're going to do 2 trips again. We're going to go out Monday night, leaving OWU at about 7:30, returning at 9:30. Or you can go Wednesday during class. So again, 2 trips. They're just not on the same day. The evening, these guys are nocturnal. So if you want to see them in action, I can't promise it, obviously, but this is the time to go and do it. Or we'll just go during class. He's going to save some of the mud puppies he catches from the night before so you can still see them, talk about your research, etc. So please, you're required to go on one of the 2 outings, either on that Monday or in the evening or Wednesday during class. So I apologize for changing it up again, but that is the case. And then I've got to talk to Chase and Judy about van driving on either of those nights too and see what you can do. Sorry, I know it's not great to keep changing that, but as they say in France, that's life. Okay, last slide here. I got a cartoon for you. Your class program, remember that your primary lit assignment is due coming up, and you also have a reading assignment for Monday. The article on reptile cognition I gave you. I don't have the class program actually posted yet for Monday, but I'll post it right after class for you. And then finally, I'll have open hours on Monday, and then be ready for the Delaware run. And I have a funny video I was going to show at the end of class today too, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to go see if any snakes are moving. Before we leave, questions? Okay, I will post a link to Monday's outing. I'm going to make the executive decision right now is that don't worry about completing a survey for this field outing. Just come and participate. We've got a bunch of other stuff going on right now. I've got the program made without it. So don't worry about a survey for this field outing. We will do one for next week for the mud puppies for sure. So we're going to meet in front of the building in about 5 minutes. Sound good? Awesome. See you there.